Welcome to the BWI Live Postgame Show. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. I hate to do this live, but if you're here with me in the chat, please tell me if you can hear me or not, because I can't hear myself for some reason, and so that's throwing me off completely. Let me know if you can hear me, and we'll make sure that if not, something else happens. But yeah, Penn State football gets a win over Washington in a way we expected. Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Penn State gets a win over Washington. We talked about this on the tailgate show. Landon called it a pretty straightforward game because Penn State should have beat that team, and they did beat that team 35-6. And guys, I got it right this time, 35-6. Apparently, I kept saying the wrong score on the Ohio State postgame show. So yes, Penn State football wins 35-6 in a game that was not really ever that close. They got a fast start. Obviously, that first drive on defense went a little longer than fans probably would want. 13 plays, 7 minutes. But after that, touchdown, fumble. And of course, on the Blue White Illustrated message board, if you want to hang out with us, where all of the anxiety of the Penn State football fan base kind of percolates and then condenses and is really distilled into a fine paste. I had a conversation with somebody who said, they can't just close out teams, can they? They scored 4 straight times. They had a fumble and then a field goal. So then, one of those situations where it felt for some reason close in the third quarter, but it wasn't. Penn State dominated from beginning to end. And this is what I was talking about in the pregame. Washington has not played a quarterback of the caliber of Drew Allar. And I know Penn State ran for 266 yards in this game. That's the major talking point. But Drew Allar was 71% completion percentage, 220 yards. He had 140 yards at halftime. And they were just really good through the air. When you play an NFL-style defense in college without NFL-style players, that's what you get, especially if you go up against an NFL quarterback. And Drew Allar, whether this year or at some point in his career, he's an NFL quarterback. He's not going to have the stats in this particular offense to put up like Heisman numbers or any of those things, but he's a very good football player. His ability to diagnose, you saw tonight the number of times he got to his backside reads and was able to dice this team up. The only thing that really was missing this game was the big play, was the shot down the field. And that is really, from an X's and O's standpoint, I'll be interested to see what they did to make sure that didn't happen. Of course, we'll be getting to that on the film study. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. This is the Labatt Postgame Show. Excited to have you here. As always, you are my co-host here. And I did theater in high school. Big shock, right? Here on camera. And I should be better at acting. I should be able to just tap dance on the edge of a volcano with never looking down. But that's not that's not authentic. And I know you guys can notice when things aren't authentic. And I've had so many technical difficulties today that have no fix. It is like a security blanket to be able to hear myself in my own ears so that I know I'm live. It is throwing me off so hard that I can't hear myself. But I appreciate you guys being here and helping me out in the chat. You are my post-game host on the BWI Live Postgame Show. All of our guys are at the stadium right now. Recruiting was huge. There was news before the game. Leighton Von Brandt, 2027, very promising offensive tackle committed to the Nittany Lions. The whiteout game was awesome. It looked great on TV. Peacock was what it is. That broadcast is what it is. But it was a great night if you're a Penn State football fan. The weather was nice, 54 degrees, 35-6 is the final score. So let me know what you think of this game in the chat, and we'll talk about what you want to know. From the perspective of getting the ground game going, I wish I had this clipped for you, ready to go. James Franklin told you what they were going to do on Monday. He was asked in the Monday press conference about what the plan, the run game. What do you think about the run game? How did the run game get going? And what he said was, we need to get the traditional run game going, which you heard them repeat ad nauseum tonight. If you watched on the TV show, if you're watching walking out of Beaver Stadium, I don't know how you have cell service. I don't know how you have internet service, but you didn't miss anything on this side of stuff. He talked about what they needed to do to get the ground game going. And he mentioned different schemes and formations, but he started with whether that is counter or inside zone, outside zone. And he listed a whole bunch of things. But he said what they were going to do on Monday: run counter, and they spammed the QB counter with Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren only had 3 carries for 7 yards, 2 touchdowns on those, and a couple of really important conversions. Also, a lot of those came in other situations as well, where they were pulling 2 guards, pulling a guard to tackle, pulling a slot receiver who was actually a guard and a running back, lead blocks from a running back plus another guy coming from the backside. And that's the other half of this. When you play very specific defense in the NFL, you can get away with it because everyone's great. In college, those are college football players. Those are not, guys drafted in the 4th round from Ferris State that Bill Belichick found while scouting a guard he took in the 2nd round. This is not the NFL. And when you run NFL concepts, you're going to get college results. And that's why I asked James Franklin about this on Wednesday. And he said they will have some difficulties that they're not expecting, because when you have such disparities in the field width, you have to account for those in your defense. And if I can notice on Tuesday an afternoon watching here in my studio being like, oh yeah, they only run 2 coverages, they mix it up a little bit. You know who else knows that? Andy Kotelicki, James Franklin, Tyler Warren, Drew Allar. They knew what was coming tonight, and that was evident by the fact that Drew Allar had an 80% completion percentage at halftime, and I think a couple of them were drops in that situation. And that's not to say, again, that Drew Allar was the star of the game. Tyler Warren is always the star of the game, but Katron Allen, strong game tonight. So that's my initial thoughts on what this was. Penn State dominated from beginning to end. The offensive line for Washington is big. They aren't necessarily good. Zane Durant set a tone early in the game and was dominant. That defensive line was dominant throughout the game. I had a couple of stills that I'd show on the Blue White Illustrated message board, trying to do some in-game analysis. There were plays where either Washington was intentionally not blocking the defensive line, or they got beat so badly that they just tried to block somebody else and make it look like they were doing their job. But either way, it looked like a screen on a run play. The entire defensive line was in the backfield, not even pushing their man into the backfield. They were just in the backfield unaccompanied. If those were children on a playground unaccompanied, you would call somebody. That's how free they were of other people watching them. So it was a dominant performance, and this is kind of what Penn State does, right? We talk about this, play close game against Ohio State, they lose, and then they come and beat up on little brother Washington. And this is what I expected, and why I had the kind of tone I did this week of this was not a team that was going to let that happen, because they have not shown they're a team that is a letdown performance sort of team. And so when that conversation happens, and James Franklin has that conversation with the media, or he mentions it in his opening statement, it's a message to his team. It's not the same concern that it might have been when this was something that happened previously. Stephen Light is here. He says less frustration, more happiness. It also leads to less people donating to the channel. There are less hard opinions about this game than any of the games we've had so far. So let's see what you got in the chat. There's a lot of people talking about the interception, the fumble from Quinshon Judkins last week, and the fumble from Tyler Warren this week. And here's the thing. Watching it here in my studio, I thought both were fumbles. When you turn to make a football move, and I think he even put his arm out to stiff arm somebody, that's a football move. I don't care either way. I know they're big plays, but they are so close that if you have the opinion it's one thing, you're right. And if I have the opinion it's the other, I think I'm also valid to be right because it's milliseconds of film, and it's obviously very important thing that happened in one game, and it's something that the only thing it did was delay the inevitable in this one. So the fumble last week, this week, I think the most important thing that we can show you from an officiating standpoint, and here we are 10 minutes in talking about officiating, is that you can't control the weather and you can't control how the officials are going to call the game. Last week, Penn State got a bad draw from the officials. Let them play, right? Well, Penn State can't play in that game. They don't have the players to do that. This game, first off, Washington doesn't play like that. They play more off coverage. They don't play as aggressively up in your face. And secondly, these officials were calling everything tonight. The calls they made tonight would have been the mildest things that happened last week. So you can't really control that. What else we got here in the chat? Kevin Chandler says they're against the Nittany Lions. I disagree. Obviously, I disagree. I think Kevin Chandler is our super fan on the channel. So, like, just everybody knows he's a big Penn State fan. Appreciate him being here. But that's just how they called that game. And again, Penn State plays physical with wide receivers when they can as well. They're going to try and get away with everything they can in those situations. This game, they had the better athletes. They had the bigger, faster, stronger on almost all of the things. And so the roles were reversed. And instead of playing poorly, Penn State put up 35 points. And, in this situation, they were Ohio State and they dominated, so that there was really nothing for either of these quarterbacks to do from an offensive perspective. 10 completions for 59 yards for Will Rogers and the interception at halftime. That was a decision to pull him that had nothing to do with the passing game. And I feel like in this game where there were 73 rushes, and I'm talking about the passing game, I feel like maybe I'm missing the mark here accidentally. But the reason they put in the backup quarterback, as you saw, was because they couldn't run the ball between the tackles. They could not run anything in the standard run game. So what do they have to do? They put in their backup quarterback, and they have to manufacture plays by using quarterback option, read option, quarterback powers, straight up quarterback runs to try and take some of the pressure off of the front of the run. And truthfully, it didn't really work at all that much. Now, they did get one good drive that operated and got down the field, aided by a couple of penalties, as we've already talked about. But when it came to the passing game, there really wasn't anything there for him to do because he didn't have any time to throw the football. And that brings us to one of the things that we get to here on the Labatt post-game show pretty early in the show, and it's a major storyline here. That is the defensive player of the game. The defensive player of the game is brought to you by State College criminal defense attorney Matt McClanahan of McClanahan Law Firm. Matt is a super fan. He texts me before every game to give me his opinion and his prediction on the game. He's been to, I think, almost 120 games at this point. He stopped giving me the update, so I don't really remember at this point. He's 117 at UCLA. He said 27-10 win, solid. He wasn't going over the top because he also thought it was going to be a 31-13 blowout last week. And I'm not trying to throw him under the bus. I'm just trying to give you the idea of how every Penn State fan felt this week was, let's pull in the horns a little bit. Let's be a little bit conservative because nobody's seen this Washington team because they play at 11 o'clock at night, apparently. Yeah, he said 27-10. And that's conservative, but obviously Penn State was able to get more than that. And our player of the game is Abdul Carter. Absolutely no question about it. This was a breakout game for Abdul Carter. This was the welcome to the national stage, which happened on Peacock, not against Ohio State. Although last week he also had 2 sacks there, but 5 solo tackles, 2 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, a quarterback hit, and a forced fumble. He was in the backfield the whole game. Did it on the right side, did it on the left side, was in the run. His ability to swim against zone plays and get into the backfield on run plays is, I mean, he's going to be a first-round draft pick because he's showing the building blocks of being a complete defensive lineman from the edge in a way that NFL players do it. He's not doing the I'm going to learn the position and I'm going to do the basics and then I'm going to get a little better. He went all in on, okay, how does JJ Watt play? How does Micah Parsons play? That's how he plays defensive end. And it was very impressive tonight. But I also want to talk about a couple of other players that were really good in this game. Obviously, Zane Durant doesn't have many stats, 2 tackles and a quarterback hit, but he was in the backfield multiple times, blowing up run plays, making guys bend back against the run, and then got tackled for a loss. 9 tackles for a loss in the game. I was really impressed with Zion Tracy as a run defender early in the game. Penn State was plugging the holes in the interior of the offensive line and bouncing a 230-pound running back to Zion Tracy, who's like 185 maybe, and he was bringing that guy down. So that was really impressive. I know he gave up a couple of plays in coverage, but those slants can be – I think those slants are the hardest thing to cover because you have to win the jam at the line of scrimmage immediately. And especially if you're playing in the slot, there's a two-way go. You've got to make sure that guy, the player you're covering, has to declare what he's going to do, and then you're going to react to that. And it all happens so quickly. And when the ball is supposed to be there within like 1.5 seconds, either you're at the catch point or you give up a tackle. Like you give up 5 yards. So it's not a big play, but they kept like biting at those things early in the game, which is why coming out of this game, the overall completion percentage for Washington was 70%, but they averaged like 5 yards a pass. Not very productive. This is the Labatt post-game show, as you can imagine, powered by Labatt. When it's time to kick back and watch the game, grab a Pilsner that's as pristine as Happy Valley itself. It has been amazing. The football weather has been awesome. Walking back from the tailgate show, it was the right level of cool, whereas like a little crispy on the edges, just like a good Pilsner. Labatt Blue and Labatt Blue Light deliver unmatched taste that goes down smooth every time. Whether you're tailgating, I saw plenty of them out there at the tailgate show at the Blue White Illustrated tailgate, or with 110,000 of your friends at the Whiteout. Grab a Labatt Blue Light for your go-to unbeatable drinkability. Bleed blue and white, drink blue and light. Find Labatt products at Washington at Route 15 Beverage, 9 Tristan Drive in Dillsburg. Please drink responsibly. Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. What do you got to hear for me here in the chat? HF Transplant says, I'm happy for the win. Just keep running the table. You're the man. Appreciate you, HF Transplant. Warren at the goal line broke my heart thinking about last week. Play Corey Smith more. Stop running option to the short side of the field. So you remind me of something here on this second part, Jay, and that one of the tweaks that I really liked in the game from Penn State's rushing attack, that Nick Singleton run to the edge where he did get out into space, right? And he got that first down on the opening drive. That's the same play they've run all year with Tyler Warren on the shovel pass, right? The only difference is instead of setting Nick Singleton in a jet motion across the formation, whether where you can choose to hand it to him or not, by turning that into a pitch play, you allow more time for the decision. You allow him to be a part of the play a little bit longer, and then the option there is that Allar can pitch inside or pitch outside. And I think that's a little bit better of a balanced play to put players in conflict and give an opportunity for Singleton to get the ball more instead of it just being straight up like it's almost straight up a pitch every single time, that shovel pass to Tyler Warren. Then they came back and actually did shovel it to him later in the game, which I thought was good. It's hard not to see that, right? To see that goal line play and then think if you just like take that, put it in the last game, does that change? I think they made a point of it, right? 2 touchdowns the next game. It's almost like, yeah, we learned our lesson there. Corey says, he says, screw those non-donating weenies. I got you, T Freezy. He gave $50 to the channel. And I'm just going to read this because he did that. Offense looked great besides the third. D showed up big. Great game. Officials are garbage. Here's the thing about the officials. They are allowed to call the game the way they believe it, right? That's like that's like a lawyer and a judge, right? A judge in a court of law decides things based on the way they see the world. Whenever you're the arbiter of decision making of what is right and wrong, nobody's going to like your decisions. But if you're consistent, at least everyone knows what to expect from you. I don't know these officials, right? I don't keep track of these things. There are stats out there that keep track of these things, and there are people that know that. I'm not one of those people. But as long as you're consistent, the crew itself, then it's fine. But if you're not consistent, crew to crew, I absolutely get that. This is kind of like in basketball. I learned this a lot when I was covering basketball on my previous radio show, and when I've been covering it here at Blue White Illustrated with Nate Bauer. Basketball crews are even more like they have a personality in that situation. The third quarter, the offense, they didn't really have the ball all that long, did they? I know they fumbled, and then it was a really long scoring drive, or a not scoring drive, I should say, for Washington, who ended up, was that where they missed the field goal? But anyway, the third quarter was, a 9.5 minute drive that ended in a field goal. So they took up more than half of the quarter. And so Penn State drives and just misses a field goal there in the third quarter. So I thought they were okay the third. The fumble is what it is, and that kind of killed the momentum of that, what felt like was going to be a scoring drive, right? Because they had 2 plays. They got an explosive play to Tyler Warren that he was going to keep running on that. And then suddenly they don't have the football anymore, and they give up an opportunity for points. So I know what you're saying. That just feels in those situations like it is a little bit circumstance. The defense has something to say about that when they spend so much time on the field with the opposition. Ted says, how many games were we upset about because they didn't go this way? Last week stung, but this was what we wanted time and time again. Yeah, I think that this is the game I was expecting. That I don't want to say demanded, but this was a game they had to look good, in my opinion. You come off the loss to Ohio State. I think perception matters in these situations because we don't know how these things are going to break coming on the stretch. Indiana has a bye, then they play Ohio State. That's going to be massive for Penn State's postseason opportunities. So I do think perception, when you're not one of the top 5 teams in Penn State, maybe they're going to be one of the top 5 teams in the playoff ranking, but they won't be seeded 1 through 4. So do they get to 5? Do they get to the top of where they can go? And you've got to start putting some of these more complete games on the record, especially late in the year. So I do think that playing this way on offense, especially when people are mocking you, some people are mocking you for the way that you played last week. Those perception things obviously did not affect the College Football Playoff Committee by ranking them 6th, but you don't want to give them ammunition to reconsider their decision. I certainly would not want to do that. Dewey Petrie donates to the channel. Appreciate you. Don't think he had anything to say there. He says, thanks for the analysis. Says Jonathan. Can I call you Jonathan? I appreciate that. Considering last week, are we allowed to feel all right after this one? Yes. I'm always good with you feeling all right after a game, win or lose. Hopefully you feel good after this one because it was a good feeling win. 4 touchdowns, 3 in the second quarter. Especially the way they operated that 2-minute drive at the end of the quarter. That has been the thing that Allar's gotten better and better at. There's been a couple of games where it hasn't gone their way, but I do think that he has gotten better and is showing like that's the NFL stuff, that 2-minute drive where they were able to mix the run and the pass with the way that the clock does stop in those situations between under 2 minutes. I like the way they managed that, and they were able to keep things on balance to get points before halftime, which I'm fairly confident watching that opening drive they were going to get more points after that. Ryan says the offensive line seems mid to me. Was bad last week against Ohio State, played okay tonight. Maybe I'm wrong? Question mark? No, I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong. They played better tonight. And I was thinking about this, Ryan, where I'm not noticing them. So that's a good sign. But also, you're not noticing like Katron Allen 6 yards downfield with nobody touching him, right? Like you're not seeing Saquon Barkley and the Eagles do this now where suddenly he's 17 yards downfield and you're like, oh, what happened? They didn't have any of that. So they're not dominating up front. I did get a peek at a couple of things. I thought Sal Wormley played a little better early in the game. And same thing with Nick Dawkins. Venga had some really strong reach blocks. And then the pulling game I think was pretty good. Tyler Warren had a good game blocking, but that's one of those situations where you catch him on the highlights, right? You catch the good blocks on the highlights, and then they because he was on camera, and suddenly now that's part of like the highlight package for Tyler Warren. So he did look good today, and I want to give him credit for that. But I don't know what he missed in the game as well, because those misses, you don't see those because those plays aren't interesting. They go for 2 yards. Coin Intelligence Agency says we should raise more money to pay the officials. Well, Coin Intelligence Agency, I think you have an inside track on how to do that. I'm not a person who knows how to raise donations. Obviously, I would be more valuable doing other things if that were the case. Cheng Yifeng says, just come to say goodnight to everybody. Appreciate you being here. I know it is 11:45 at night and you're here on the BWI Live Postgame show. I really appreciate you guys being here. I wasn't quite sure after a blowout win in the kind of meh-sphere that people are feeling, but I'm glad that you're here with us. I want to go through some of my postgame notes. My computer started glitching, so I had my notes up ready. I was so prepared to be early today. And then, of course, everything decided to short circuit before the show. But I always like to keep notes during the game of what I'm noticing as the game goes on. And I want to pull those up. I think A.J. Harris is playing very good football. Jalen Kimber as well. Those guys, I understand they gave up a couple of plays and then the pass interference call, but I'm really impressed with those two. Nick's, here's an interesting one that I don't know what to do with. Nick Singleton looked healthier at the beginning of the game. He was running, I think, with a little more conviction. He's running hard through the tackles. He didn't break any tackles like in a demonstrably like effective way, but he was leaning forward and getting yardage. And then I look up and he hasn't touched the ball after halftime, I don't think. If not, it wasn't a lot. And he ends 7 carries for 45 yards. So he's clearly still not healthy. I think they're limiting. He's got a limited pitch count. He started the game. He averaged 6.5 yards a carry, and then he didn't play for most of the game. And you saw a lot of Katron Allen, who had a very good game, another bounce back game for Katron, who's had a bit of an up and down season so far. So the running game, as effective as it was still mysterious in this game. The stats obviously padded at the end by Corey Smith, ripping off a 78-yard run. Very happy to see the speed translate because you watched him on his high school film and that dude can run. And that's very like that speed. Sometimes you're like, okay, maybe there's some verified testing numbers, and maybe there's some feeling you have of a guy is fast. But we've even seen fast guys that don't necessarily translate to the field, right? Where it doesn't feel like it translates. He got outside and was gone. Now, the difference is he's a freshman who got here in the summer. If he had gone through a full year of conditioning at Penn State, he scores on that play where he has the juice and the gas to get to the end of that run. I'm it's one run. I did this with Daniel George years ago when he got a big play, and I'm like, look at that. He's big and he's fast and he's athletic and he can outrun everybody. He's going to be great. And, that never translated. And I think Corey is in a different situation. Let me be clear in terms of all of it. But I just, those one big plays, the thing that I was glad of, at least it confirmed that speed we saw in high school absolutely showed up when he finally got on the field. And that is something, as we've been talking about, those explosive plays, where are they coming from? Well, I don't think Corey Smith is going to help you in a game that matters big time, because I don't think he's going to see the field. Quentin Martin is coming back from stuff, but they obviously want to preserve his red shirt. I think they're saving him for other games, Minnesota, Maryland. It felt like from Monday on that Penn State felt pretty confident about what was going to happen in this game, and that played out on the field. So I think that you've got some options at least behind Singleton and Allen who do give you a little bit of juice. I just wonder, in big games, will they see the field? Because the whole conversation starting last week and really ramping up this week is, what's the path to the playoff? Who are you playing? And we've seen the bench gets very short when we get into big games to watch Penn State play against teams that are of equal talent or greater talent. And I don't know that Corey would get an opportunity in games like that, but I agree with, I forget who it was that said play Corey Smith more. I think he's going to have an opportunity to be very good at Penn State. Corey says, hyperbole aside, Collins looks great and Corey Smith showed some game. Will Rojas learn how to tackle? Corey, I am so frustrated. I don't have anything. I'm off it. Okay. I think he's super talented, but I counted at least 3 missed tackles in this game from Tony Rojas. And it's frustrating because he's at the point of attack. And I almost can even tell you what happened in some of these situations where they were saying go low on Coleman. Make sure you tackle his legs. And if you dive, you're going to miss. You've got to tackle low, but make sure you run your feet and you're not jumping at his legs because he's very elusive. And so I'm fairly certain that's what happened here, but it's not like there's been a preponderance of evidence that he has tackled really, really well. And oh no, here's one weird thing. He just hasn't been tackling good this year. Because he's in the right spot. He is 90% there. He just needs to tackle, and it's very frustrating to watch, especially somebody who has been, loudly in favor of his play. I don't know if he, did he play in the second half? Did they pull him from the game? I've got to go back. That's something I'm going to be looking for now when I do my Sunday film study. And by the way, if you're here, we've got a really good crowd tonight at nearly midnight. I appreciate you guys being here. If you don't know about us yet, join BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, code PSU1, 2 months for $1. Use that promo code. You'll get 2 months. So count with me. November, December, and you'll get even a little bit into January. So if there's a playoff run, you're going to get 100% of early signing day. You're going to get all of the stuff that happens around the new year. And of course, basketball, if you're into that stuff, wrestling, if you're into that stuff, we got a wrestling show. So use promo code PSU1. And I know the people that watch the show, half of you aren't subscribed to this channel, which is free. Listen, I used to be stingy with my subscriptions on YouTube too. I used to do that because I was like, I'm going to curate my YouTube experience. And here's the thing. That doesn't do anything. You're fed the videos everybody else is fed. The algorithm knows you because Google owns it. So they, have everything from your thumbprint to what size underwear you wear. They know you. So just subscribe to the channel and then our videos will show up. When all the other nonsense and the trash that flows by will at least be in the stream and you can watch our shows that way. I've become very much more loose with my personal likes on my personal channel. Ted Wimstead says the targeting was correct. They robbed that cornerback of an interception. Which targeting call are you talking? The one that was ejected, the ejectable one where the corner was ejected. This is the problem, is in the moment that when it happened, like live, I thought it was a good tackle. It was a great tackle from 2008 for sure. That was a 2010 jacked up highlight. But yeah, he lowered the crown of his helmet and drove it through Omari Evans' chin, who got, they were testing his neck there on the sideline. I don't know which cornerback you're talking about. I do apologize about that. But let's see what else we got in the chat. So this also happened before the game. Something that our reporters at the site were telling us about. Don says, kind of crazy that Franklin is constantly called to be fired. Dude is going to be 11-1 for the first time in the expanded playoff, and they want him fired. Reel it in, people, he says. James Franklin was booed in the pregame introductions. Like when they said James Franklin, they booed the guy, and then his team won the game 35-6. I get it. I don't want to sound like James Franklin and go, I get it. It is very frustrating because nothing wipes away the Ohio State loss. Winning 35-6 over Washington. The difference between beating Minnesota in the 2022 whiteout game and beating Washington, to me, is just that the W and the M are upside down from each other. Kind of the same team. Sorry, 1 second. So you have that feeling of frustration, and you're allowed to do those things, but this team is firmly in the college football playoff. They're in the top half of the college football playoff. And I think they played well enough tonight that the playoff committee is going to continue to reward them with those things. Here's another thing that I want to talk about when it comes to the offense specifically, because to me, the defense is fine. They played a really good team last week. I feel like they were a little bit over their skis with intensity, and that made them have some mental mistakes. But other than that, I think they've been fine. Good, maybe even great. They're getting more pressure, especially in this game. They put that poor quarterback under duress, that freshman quarterback, in a no-win situation. And then he, breaks out for a massive run, which was good for him. But the offense needed a new order. And we talked about it in the tailgate show. I'm repeating myself. Do you want me to repeat myself? I'm trying to find a new way to say this. Tight ends aren't fast. Tight ends operate over the middle of the football field where the run game operates. So the traditional run game and tight ends all use the middle 22 yards of the field. If you don't establish any actual threats to the outside the numbers, to the hash and beyond, any of those areas, if you don't do that, teams can cheat to take away tight ends and the run game and check downs to running backs. So the fact that they came out and they fed Trey Wallance, where he had 5 catches for 84 yards on 8 targets, Tyler Warren eventually got 11 targets, became like the bell cow in the second half. But the fact that they got Trey Wallance the football made it so this particular team wasn't going to be able to key in on just one player, because they were able to establish credible threats. And I understand last week, because of all the things we talked about, that was going to be tough. But they haven't even really they have intentionally gotten Tyler Warren targets on the first drive, the first play, all of these, like, emphasizing to the point that sometimes I feel like there is a push for this guy, not just that he's our best player, but he has the opportunity to be an award winner. And so we're going to give him all the stats he needs to be an award winner to elevate our program. That is a wild speculation on my part, to be clear. But it just seems to happen, right? Tyler Warren almost gets 3 touchdowns in the whiteout. I think there were a couple times where he had an opportunity near the goal line. If, a ball doesn't get tipped, or if, he's able to, they were trying to feed him a touchdown late in the game as well. And I understand, like, he's their best player. You obviously want to get him the football, blah, blah, blah. But the amount of ways they're trying to get him the football, the amount of touches and exposure, and the amount of screen time he gets, Like, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but every once in a while, I'm side-eyeing that a little bit. I'm like, is this really the best thing to do? Because, I guess in my personal philosophy, receivers are explosive to a level that tight ends generally are not. And I do think Tyler Warren is a very good tight end who is going to be very productive in the NFL and is going to be the guy that he is now. Like, these are not shadows and manipulations and things they're making up. He is that good. But the balance was there today. And I think they even talked about on the broadcast of getting the receivers involved in the game. And that's going to pay dividends down the road for this offense. They have to establish some of these things in their own minds, even, let alone for the other team and for future opponents of here's the number of things we can do. Do we have any too cute comments in the chat? Was anything too cute tonight? Because even some of the things that didn't work, like Tyler Warren throwing the ball twice, I didn't necessarily have a problem with anything tonight. Corey is back. He says, is there an issue with Rojas that he was just so much more athletic than everyone in high school that he could forego fundamentals, but in college he needs fundamentals? Well, first off, yeah, a little bit, actually. Yes. Tony Rojas, I call this opting out of contact. When you are so athletic that you don't have to be touched if you don't want to be touched. He was a defensive end, first off, so he was not playing in space almost ever, and he could run around high school kids that were 6'2" and had no chance to actually like block him. So he never really had to take on contact. But I saw him do that last year and early this year. And the tackling thing is different than taking on contact. And he was a running back, by the way, and he ran hard through his pads. So fundamentals of tackling and contact are not things that I had a concern about with him, other than like learning to stack and shed offensive linemen, which again is not the problem. It is just tackling to me. Now, I will say something that Ohio State did last week. There were a couple of things that Washington saw on film and they tried to take advantage of in their own way, which had absolutely no chance of working. They tried to hide a receiver near the line of scrimmage in the tight end position, leak him out into the field, and get that play action bootleg to a faster guy than a tight end. Here's the problem. That guy isn't an Ohio State wide receiver. He's a good player. Number 5, the slot receiver, good player. But he's not one of those guys that's going in the first round of the NFL draft whenever their time is up, whenever their 3 years is up in college. The second thing is Penn State has been pretty good at adjusting to things that just happened to them. So that didn't work. But one of the things that did work was they tried to run outside early in the game on Penn State. And Tony Rojas, they caught him inside, which is something that Ohio State did. And so there was a little bit of that out of position, but I wouldn't even say that like he was out of position as much as they were just trying to pick on him as as the second level defender, and they let the defensive end go free. Now Penn State was able to slide a guy over the top and limit the run to maybe like 4 yards, but teams are identifying Tony Rojas to attack. So that is something where I don't know. I don't know what to do at this point. I don't know what to say at this point about Tony Rojas because I think he can do it. He's just not doing it right now. And that is, I don't know if that's a confidence thing. I don't know if that's a clarity of his assignment. Those are some of the things where, it's above my pay grade. It's over my head. And it's also behind closed doors where they're going to talk about those things and have those conversations. If you don't know 100% of what the call is, you might not know what his responsibilities outside of the standard understanding of a play, right? So you have your gap, and then you probably have assignments on that play. We're here on the BWI Live Labatt Postgame Show. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Appreciate everyone being here. Coin Intelligence Agency says, think Rojas will be a sound tackler next year. Here's the thing is I've been going to the conversation of I am fairly certain he's injured, playing through something, but just like the offensive line conversation, it doesn't go away, but at a certain point, I don't know what else to say. So like he's playing with it, he has to be able to produce. And that's where I think Anthony Donko found a new level against Ohio State where he's playing banged up. He's not dominating the way he was used to because he's so strong and so explosive and so quick. And now he's kind of lost some of those things, and he's still trying to learn how to be a good football player within his impressive skill set that is not at its fullest. He's been able to adapt. And if there is something still wrong with Tony Rojas, he hasn't been able to adapt to be effective. He can play, he can go out there and he can do certain things, but he has not been a guy who is playing through the injury in a way that is making you think it isn't there, I guess is the thing. And again, like Singleton, other than the fact that he didn't play a whole lot tonight, was doing that as well. So anyway, I honestly don't want to beat him up about all of these things. I don't like singling out and then like pointing at players, but it is a thing. Like it is definitely a problem that Penn State has in this situation of they don't necessarily have a will linebacker right now that they can feel confident in all these situations. They started out in a 3 linebacker set, so DeLuca can come in and take some of those reps off of him at will linebacker. But if you got to play 3 linebackers, he's the only one at this point. Jeffrey Mosher says the only thing that would make Corey Smith cooler would be that he was Tank Smith's little brother, but he's not. Yes, he's not Tank Smith's little brother. It's funny because Tank Smith actually came up this week. We were watching Jonah Coleman. Landon and I were watching film and watching Jonah Coleman run. And it's really impressive, especially if you're watching like the all-22 footage of his ability to cut laterally and get out into space with like one step. He's Katron Allen adjacent. And I made the joke and I said, is Jonah Coleman what Tank Smith thought he was in his head? Because they're kind of the same size. Like they're kind of built the same way. And Landon Levy was like, yeah, probably. So, yeah, this is the second time that Tank Smith has come up within a calendar week, which I didn't see coming. Coleman, I was really impressed with their ability to keep him under wraps. One of the things that I thought they might try to do is take advantage of that lateral cutting ability because he really likes to do it. And this is something that I think smart teams do against Katron Allen as well, which is at the drop of a hat, he will bounce to the backside of a run. He is very willing to take what he sees and then cut backside because he's thinking everyone's over pursued. I would imagine that's what he's thinking. And Jonah Coleman is very similar to that. So Penn State would bury the point of attack with bodies. They would blitz linebackers. They'd throw guys would shoot the gap, and then he would bounce laterally. And Penn State always had a guy out there to clean up. That's something I think Tom Allen has done pretty well this year is using guys to spy in the passing game and flushing quarterbacks out and then having a Tony Rojas or an Abdul Carter chase them down. And then have in another situation, like in the run game, they do have spill players there ready to clean things up. And I think that that's a pretty good design from this defense that knows it's going to get into the backfield. It's a pretty impressive thing that you can do. Trying to see if there's anything else that I haven't thought about tonight to talk about. So here's the thing. When you're in a blowout and you're like, man, Boston, what's his first name? Denzel Boston, 3 catches. He didn't have an impact on the night. 2 catches for 35 yards. He had one good slant. I think that was a catch and run. No, it was the deep shot over Elliott Washington. Sorry, I'm being my own co-host right now of like remembering things in the moment. He didn't really have an effect on the game tonight because they had to abandon the game plan so quickly. On the flip side, I think there's a new conversation about the Penn State cornerback room, which includes Cam Miller, Zion Tracy, AJ Harris, and Jalen Kimber. Elliott Washington's really struggled recently. Play at the catch point, the ability to mirror receivers. Tonight on the quick game, he was consistently behind, gave up a first down, I think, early in the game. That's a bummer because I think Elliott is a very talented football player. And he just needs to find the right position or the right situation for him, because he's been struggling a little bit the last couple of weeks where teams have started to pick on him. Early in the year, there was some conversation about getting a little lucky on some of those plays that didn't, the touchdown that went over his head that wasn't caught against West Virginia. But then he came back and was genuinely playing pretty well against some decent teams. The Illinois game, I thought he was good. And that is regressed since then. So darn, Penn State has 4 corners instead of 5 that you feel confident in most situations. And that's another comment that I think is important, that Zion Tracy and Cam Miller have been playing pretty good in the slot. I think Cam Miller, maybe he hasn't got as many targets and teams haven't picked on him recently. They haven't been able to, but I also think in zone coverages too, he's been able to clean up and play hard and come downhill and make some plays. That cornerback position, which I thought might struggle because neither of those guys are big. Both Cam Miller and Zion Tracy are a little bit on the lean side, especially when you got Jalen Reed as the guy you wanted to play there at the beginning of the year, and you've had guys like Curtis Jacobs playing in that position, and then suddenly it's 2 corners that are 180 to 185 pounds, and they have come downhill and cleaned things up really well in zone coverage specifically. Davian Collins had a near interception. He had the interception, and then it fell. It was the reverse of what happened to Penn State last week in the end zone, where he had it as the defensive back, and then it fell out of his hands for a completion, as opposed to Penn State's receiver had it last week, and it fell into the hands of the defensive back for an interception and a touchback. So decidedly bad luck in those situations. So that's what I got. I think that's going to be it today for the show, because there's a lot of stuff to get to, and everyone does have a lot of things to do this week, a lot of things to get to, and it is now officially Sunday. So in about 7 hours, I'm going to wake up. I'm going to be in this exact seat, probably wearing this shirt, because I'm going to go fall asleep in this and then just wake up, start working, and do our Sunday film study. I'm going to break down every single play. I'm going to give you the context and the details of what happened in all of the situations that you didn't see on television, and help paint the full picture of how Penn State dominated in this game, and why the offense was able to get going, why the defense was able to win up front so decisively. All those details coming up tomorrow on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Once again, you can subscribe, code PSU1, 2 months for $1. That's our special offer for our YouTube and podcast audience. Podcast guys, thank you for listening. You're the unsung heroes too as well. Please like, subscribe, comment, and give us 5 stars. I don't know how those work, honestly. I listen to podcasts, and I just listen to podcasts. But if you want to help us out, please comment on the podcast as well. But there's more coming up. Don't worry, I'm ending a little bit early so you can get over to James Franklin's press conference and our instant analysis from the guys at the stadium. They're going to give you their thoughts on what happened. So we'll be back, and appreciate you being here. Especially next week, we're going to have another post-game show. We're going to have another tailgate show. It's going to be a ton of fun. They're going to beat Purdue, I'm assuming, right? And we can do this again. Nice, easy, low-stakes post-game show. And now that I've said that, Penn State's going to get into a battle with Purdue, right? Everyone loves a good jinx a week out. Okay, we'll talk to you later.